Welcome to the Awaken Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Walters. Get ready to create magic and miracles as you lean into your heart's desires. I believe not only does the heart want what it wants, but it knows. This show is a weekly deep dive into what it means to live from an awakened heart. I'll be sharing inspiring stories and real conversations with people just like you, who have turned the ordinary into the extraordinary. My mission is to show you how you too can be connected and heart-centered in every area of your life. Your journey to aligning with more love, more joy, and your wildest dreams come true starts now. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Awaken Heart Podcast. It's so good to be back here with you. I have been a little lax as far as getting some of these episodes out. I've had a lot going on at home. I've launched a new podcast that I've been getting some episodes out. That's for my relocation business. Get Ready, Set, Move. We have a digital relocation course that is going to help people get really clear if you don't know where you want to live and you're feeling the urge to move. We take you from ideas all the way through getting clear on your vision to all the steps in between to settling into your new home and what you do next once you settle into your new home, whether you're don't quite have an idea of where you might move to, or maybe you're moving for work, or you have an idea, but you just don't know how to put all the pieces together. We help you do that. There is a link in the show notes for that. We've created a bunch of ebooks for relocating with college kids moving on their own and the parents. We have one for the solo woman who is moving on her own, just like I did twice in the last time across the country. There's one for moving with pets, and there's also another one for parents with kids, along with some other freebies as well. So that's really exciting. It's been a lot of fun getting that out. But like I said, I always love jumping on the microphone, getting back to my awakened heart family. So this is great. I also became a kitten mom. If anyone has a kitten or a puppy, they know how much work it is. And this one I wasn't expecting to get because my beloved Taz had passed about a little over a month ago. She was almost 20 years old. And I planned to spend, at least 6 months without having another animal. And, I grieved and I processed all that. And it was, I felt that space. I wanted the universe to fill the void. I wanted to fill it with a man, like a human man, a partner, because the universe loves to fill a vacuum, a void. And I didn't expect a little kitten to come along. So I guess my mail came in the form of a 4-legged, furry, 6-week-old kitten. My friend actually found him on a wooded trail, and she literally dove through the brambles and chased him up the hill and everything to rescue him. He would have been, bird bait or coyote food. So I'm so grateful. It didn't take too much twisting of my arm to say, okay, I'll take him. I had almost put all my beloved Taz's stuff away. I had one more big thing to put in the garage that's been sitting at the top of the stairs since she passed. And literally, this is so surreal that my Max, my new kitten, came along 1 month from the day that my beloved Taz passed. So that's been something. But I hope everyone's doing well out there. There's so much going on in the world, and we are going to focus on getting into our heart centers and for another soulful conversation. Today's conversation is with Dr. Jonathan Marion. He's a true Renaissance soul whose journey spans academia, cultural exploration, and personal transformation. Jonathan's academic pursuits began over 2 decades ago, delving into the intricacies of cultural meanings within personal contexts, with a PhD and an MA in cultural and psychological career as an associate professor at the University of Arkansas, offering courses on subjects ranging from culture and medicine to body and identity. But Jonathan's story doesn't end there. Beyond academia, he has explored diverse paths from volunteering on communal farms in Israel to backpacking across continents. He's not only a scholar, but a skilled photographer, dance instructor, and even a burgeoning stand-up comedian and improv artist. And during this conversation, we're actually recording. He's in Brazil. He has the ability to literally work and teach from anywhere. And he's got a passion for a Brazilian dance form called Zouk, which I learned about during our conversation. As the founder of Steps Along the Way, LLC, Jonathan's coaching and consulting endeavors reach clients across the globe. With certifications in emotional intelligence, body-oriented coaching, and positive psychology, he brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to his transformative work. Join us as we uncover the ripple effect of authenticity, connection, and communication, and how they shape our lives and the world around us. From Jonathan's journey as an award-winning cultural anthropology professor to his role as a passionate life coach, we explore the keys to living deeply meaningful and fulfilling lives. Stay tuned as we uncover the secrets to fostering genuine connections, igniting positive change, and living with intention in this episode of the Awakened Heart Podcast. Hi, Jonathan. Welcome to the Awakened Heart Podcast.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming all the way from Brazil, where you're currently spending some time at. And how long have you been there right now? I know that you're traversing.
Yeah, I got here about 2 weeks ago. I'm a pretty much full-time nomad, but got here about 2 weeks ago. We'll be here about another month right now.
And I love that. I think it's so wonderful because the kind of work that you do and that so many are doing, you can reach anybody from any point of the globe just from being in front of your microphone and your computer and connect with so many people globally that way. And as we know that energy it's non-local. So when you're working with people, even on an energetic level, it's just not contingent to being in the same room or the same space. So I love that you're in Brazil. Can you bring a little sun for me here in Michigan? It's a little cold right now. And I myself moved back to Michigan because my mom has Alzheimer's and my dad passed, last January. I never thought I would find myself full circle, but here I am back in Michigan. And, I actually love the community that I live in. So we share some of the same story here. But for my audiences that don't know you, I'm so fascinated by you have so many accreditations. Like I'm going to list them in the show notes just so people can see how really educated, not just like from your PhDs and your traditional sense of education as a cultural anthropologist, but you have so many accreditations for what you're doing now, like coaching and all these, different certifications that you have. So you can help people, really, really gain more emotional intelligence, and you have your steps along the way, your whole business model, which I'll have you go into more in depth. It's about creating a deliberate and intentional way of living. And can you explain to my audience what a cultural anthropologist is? That I had to kind of look up and learn myself.
Sure. So if you think, 50, 60 years ago, you might have heard of someone going and living on an island with a, remote population and just sort of studying their social system and what they did as practices and what were their beliefs. And that was cultural anthropology. But since then, we don't have to just apply it to, remote or distant populations. It's actually more a methodology. And so it applies to anything. And so what do people, think and do and why? And what do they not think and do and why not?
Mm-hmm. And what are you seeing? What are you seeing? Because I'm seeing a lot that's lost now in our Western culture and our society. And we used to think of those kind of that indigenous tribes might do, or the old lost cultures as being archaic and old. But now we're finding so much wisdom in the way that things were done before, because they were connected more to the land. They were connected to their own rhythms of their body, the cycles of the stars. And they were just more connected to each other, the land and spirituality. Are you seeing a little more integration, like people going back to those old ways of doing?
I really think it depends on which people and in which place, because there is sort of a theoretical fallacy that happened for a while of thinking of populations, traditional populations, as frozen in time. This is the way they've been for the last however many thousand years. And that's just not true, because all people change all the time. All cultures change all the time. And it's really very infantilizing. It's very paternalistic to say, oh, you're the way you've always been. Like, people develop everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, what is that underlying sense of connection and to what? And I think part of what you're speaking to is, before you had mass media and mass transportation, people really had more time to sort of just sit and be present with each other and with the world and just noticed more. I think we get
Mm-hmm.
so caught up in the hustle and bustle of everyday life that we lose track. And it's one of the things that's there's opportunities and constraints to it, but that I enjoy so much about traveling as much as I do. It feels like life is always evolving because I don't have patterns. I don't fall into those everyday patterns
Mm-hmm.
that aren't good or bad, but they do filter our experience because we've learned, okay, what are the things I attend to? But therefore, you also then don't attend to others. And when I don't have a regular fixed pattern,
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of like how much can happen in one week? And it happens over and over. And it's really
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
Mm-hmm. I find that so fascinating, so wonderful about traveling, especially to different cultures and maybe more third world countries where things aren't as easy and you always have to think and figure things out. You don't know what the next day is going to. You can plan your itinerary for the day and you miss the train or you get off on the wrong stop or you end up, just at this beautiful little coffee shop in the middle of, some piazza somewhere and you get involved with the locals. Like it really teaches you to be more present and really appreciate more that's around you. I miss that. I can't wait to dive into that myself. And I always tell the younger generation too, like when they go into school, before they get into college, maybe take the summer off and go travel. And before they take their quote unquote job, well, we're seeing a lot of them moving away from the traditional job, which I think is wonderful. Go explore the world, take a year off, and really that you're going to learn more about yourself than you could from a 4 year, a lot of times, a traditional educational program. Yeah. So, okay. So we kind of went ahead of ourselves. I'd love for you to give a little bit of your background first and where you came from. I know that which a lot of people do before they go on to this path of soul based work, or you grew up in a dysfunctional family and, you had seasonal defective disorder, which I think a lot of Michigan people are having. And I used to have that before I moved to California. I was in California for 25 years. And I don't know, I felt like I was going through a little depression. I don't know if it was the seasons at all. So a lot of people suffer from that without knowing they suffered from that. And then just from growing up in the family and realizing certain things and then, not being kind of a rebel in school and all that, and how you piece that together. And then you got into your academia work. And then we'll go into, after you introduce that, we'll go into more of where you are now.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because even when I started my coaching business, I had one view on all of that history and background.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was very fortunate earlier, the middle of last year, in the middle of 23, I actually got to go to a 10-day ayahuasca retreat in Peru
10
with
days.
some Shipibo shamans and, did the full dieta leading up for a month. And we did
Mm-hmm.
5 ceremonies in 10 days.
Whoa.
Um, and so, yeah, it was a very dysfunctional family. One could argue my parents should have never been together. The problems were much deeper, but religion became the focal point of a lot of the strife that I lived with. And there were a lot of anger issues in the family and different types of emotional and very seldom, but occasional physical abuse. And, this isn't a unique story. These things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was an infant, an uncle committed suicide, and that has huge impacts in the family, especially I was the first grandchild on both sides. And so going from being the focus of everyone's attention to then everyone withdrawing because they're trying to protect me, but at the same time, I'm an infant. I don't understand why all of a sudden people aren't paying attention. And so it set up some really problematic patterns. And then I was in high school when I don't even think they had the name for seasonal affective disorder yet. But I remember reading a very brief blurb in, I don't know if it was like Science Today or something like that. And I remember one evening, my mother and I were coming home from somewhere, and she felt like she was taking her life in her hands to even broach the subject because of just sort of how angry I was at the time. But, she basically said, "You know what I think you have?" And I said, "I don't know the name for it, but I described it." And she's like, "How do you even know about that?" Because it was right at the beginning. It was when they were still prescribing Xanax for it.
Oh God.
Um, And it had shown up because the first quarter of every year in high school, I'd be, close to an A-level student. And then by the next quarter, when we changed the clocks and, fall and winter hit, I dropped down to a D level.
Wow.
And while I'd recover a little bit as the year went on, because it was progressive, I never made it all the way back. And so that pattern repeated year after year. And so then finally, when I went for undergrad, I left for Southern California really to have sunshine. And my first semester of university, I would say it was the first time my mother and I started to develop a really healthy adult relationship. And then, unfortunately, after that one semester, she was in a really bad car accident
Mm-hmm.
that left her with permanent closed head trauma, functional in some ways, but highly not in others.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something I had to live with for the more than 3 decades that she continued to live beyond that.
Wow. Wow. And you found it's a good thing you got a diagnosis, which a lot of people don't, but you found a way through that. Like some people use that as an excuse not to go forward in life. They keep going past and, bringing their upbringing, which is so traumatic, can be so traumatic. But there's this point where you're like, okay, well, I have to, leave this behind and create this life intentional way of living. I know you talk about deliberate, intentional, and how many people are trying, but keep living that same life. It's like this repetitive pattern. You want to be happy, but you can't be happy. So, how do you help people? What are the keys to living a fulfilling life?
Yeah, so I think there's two pieces to that. And that's also part of where my being strategy comes in as well. But I think the thing is, look, tragic things happen to people all over the world every day. And, it'd be nice if that wasn't true, but it is. And so then do we get caught up in something bad happened, or do we focus on what do I do from here? And so I don't speak Japanese, so I'm probably going to mess up the pronunciation, but kintsugi or kintsukuroi, the practice of mending with gold. So when there's pottery that's, fallen, and then you see that like gold or silver filigree filling it in, I think that really is the appropriate analogy because the cultural concept there is it's so much more beautiful now for having been broken and how it was filled in.
Mm-hmm.
And we all get broken by different experiences in life. And there are the people who stay at, fixed, or they're just not able to let go of this bad thing happened versus what do you do from there?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel very poorly, and it might have been related to the brain damage, but my mother was never able to let go of the fact that her older brother had killed himself and,
Gosh.
would continue to tell the story of when we were kids, he told me, no matter what happened to our parents, we'd always have each other. And it's like, yes, that is tragic, but that's 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
At what point are you going to be able to let go of that? And what do you do with that? And I think it's so interesting because all of the emerging research on post-traumatic growth does not show that there's an absence of distress. It shows that there's growth within the context of distress.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that's the most impactful and correlates with the best outcomes is when you're living for something beyond yourself.
Mm-hmm. So something that takes you outside of yourself and your own ego and something greater than you. So, belief in God or the universe or something or the powerful source that is within you, having something like that.
It can be that, and it could
Mhm.
just be passing along the lessons you've learned to diminish other people's suffering. It's just giving back, it's contributing. It's that it's
Mm-hmm.
not just about you. That's really the most determinant difference in all the research on post-traumatic growth.
So it's being in service to others and maybe teaching something that or might have been your greatest heartbreak or your greatest pain and helping someone else through the same thing. So there are so many people that are stuck in the traumas or something that happened. I mean, I'm still traumatized over the loss of my cat when I moved. I mean, I'm so traumatized by it. I don't know how to let it go. There's guilt, there's rumination over it, what could have been, should have been. So what keeps somebody I mean, mine's been a year, but someone that keeps holding on to something for 40 years, 30 years, whatever it
Mm.
is it the old wiring in the brain that's, used to that I don't know, it doesn't feel good, but there's like actually it's familiar to them. It's not, I can't say comfort, but it's a familiarities.
Yeah, I think that's right on point, and it goes a step further because it's always attached to some version of should.
Yeah,
Something
exactly.
should have happened a different way,
Mm-hmm.
something shouldn't have happened.
Instead of what is.
Um, and exactly. And so, like, I think back early September, you had JJ
Yes. Mm-hmm.
DiGeronimo, who really spoke about replacing I should.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a very similar, it was funny to me when I actually heard that episode, because I have a very similar practice that I use with a lot of my clients, which is I have them, for 1 week, keep a should journal
Mm.
and a left and a right column. On the left side, anytime you catch yourself thinking or saying it about anything external, someone else, some situation. And on the right side, anytime you're saying it to yourself. And at the end of every day before you go to bed, go through and literally cross out should and rewrite the sentence with could. Because exactly as you said, should is fighting with what is.
Mm.
So I should have gone to the gym. I should have eaten healthier. My children should have listened to me. Traffic shouldn't have been that bad. It should have been sunny when I went on vacation. Well, were any of those things true or not? And just getting attached to that, it should have been different. You're just stuck in it. There is no way out. Whereas if you say, my boss could have listened to me, my coworkers could have done their fair share, my kids could have listened, I could have gone to the gym. Well, okay, but did you or didn't you? Now, what do you want to do? It empowers you to go forward with your next steps as opposed to just getting stuck in this sort of very fixed mindset and worldview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because shoulds are a waste of, they're just a waste of time. And so many of us do it because, like, you're not, it didn't happen. Okay. It's just like when you hurt yourself, slice your arm open and then it heals, it's over with. But whatever we did, I'm stupid. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I grabbed that. That carries us on. It's like the situation's over with, and we keep torturing ourselves over somebody. So you write it. So how do you do this? So you catch yourself every time you do it during the day. Maybe you write it in a little book, or do you write it in your phone?
Again, whatever works for people. The research backs that if you can write it by hand,
Right.
it has
Carpal
a little
tunnel.
more impact.
Yeah.
That said, I think a um, really important concept to all of this is that flexible is practical,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you're not someone who carries around something, I'd much rather you do it on a little note in your phone. If you can't
Mm-hmm.
even type it in and you want to give yourself a voice memo, do it and write it out later. Like, do what works for you. That's more important. If you have the possibility to actually log it by hand and look at it at the end of the day, and like I said, cross out the should and rewrite it all with could, and
Mm-hmm.
do it through the week. And it serves a lot of purposes. One, you start to train yourself to catch those shoulds. And
Mm-hmm.
in the moment, you can already mentally start to fill in that could. But two, at the end of a week, you'll start to be able to look at and go, okay, what are the patterns? What are the things that there are a lot of shoulds around, both for
Mm-hmm.
myself and for other things in my environment? And you can
Mm-hmm.
start to really learn about yourself and then be more deliberate about shifting those patterns.
Mm-hmm. Now, can you explain a little bit? I mean, some of my audience probably already knows that, and I do to some degree as well. The difference between thinking about it or saying it to writing it. So I've heard so many times about how writing down or writing in your journal or writing your intentions or writing a statement has a more powerful effect. My arm hurts. I do it, but can you explain the science behind it of writing?
Yeah, the bare bones version is you're activating different zones of your brain to write it.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, you're recruiting more different parts of the brain and more different connections. And again, if we're trying to change how we think, the more connections and different neural pathways that we can form regarding a different pattern, how does that not serve what we're trying to accomplish?
Mm-hmm. Now, is that something along the lines of the dance, the souk or zouk? What is it called?
Brazilian Zouk. It's a
Brazilian
partner
zouk.
dance form. Yeah.
Okay.
That I actually started my dance journey a long time ago by accident, right? It's one of
Mm-hmm.
those things in life, fell for someone who was into what turned out
Uh,
to be salsa, went into a salsa studio, or what they told me was a salsa studio. I'm like, yep, got to impress this woman. So got to teach me. And got exposed to the world of competitive ballroom, which is what they actually taught more
mm,
of.
hmm
And I found it so fascinating because all of these things I was studying in graduate school about, yes, thematic issues of performance, embodiment, identity, gender, but also all these other things about like transmission of nonverbal cultural knowledge and cultural gatekeepers and competition versus cooperation versus aesthetic performance. And I got so fascinated, I went back to my advisor and I'm like, I know this is crazy, but can I change my dissertation topic from looking at gender relations on communal farms in Israel to competitive ballroom and salsa? Um,
hmm
and to his credit, he said, do an independent study for one semester, show me there's like theoretical teeth to this. But that's how that really started for me. And then through that, years later, I got exposed to Brazilian Zouk, which to me, the way I say it, salsa was my first dance love. So like your first love, special place in my heart, but Zouk is my dance soulmate. And once you find your soulmate, you're not really interested in, participating with others.
hmm
So I find that there's a lot of overlap because we judge ourselves when we dance. We judge
hmm
other people. We feel their judgments. Um, we interpret what we're doing not based on how they're judging us, but how we project that they're judging us. And so there's all these different things of how do I show up? How do I interact with others? What are all of the different ideas about like how bodies move and contact and gender relations and sexuality and whatever you have. And so it's just such a rich arena if you're open to really exploring like what comes up. I go out dancing one night and people who maybe are really like, oh, that looks like a good dancer. I'm here in Brazil. I want to see what it's like. They say
Listen.
no. Is like that, well, I don't know. Like what does that is that an ego hit? Is that not? And
hmm
it can be different night to night.
Mm. Mm. It's such an expression to dance, and I experienced it because I did a burlesque performance series when I was living in Portland, just to, um, just to get in touch with my own femininity. And it's so crazy all the stories that I heard and that the women heard within themselves when they're moving, or just all the old judgments and all the old stories and old wounding comes up. Just moving authentically, because we weren't taught routines. We were taught to move the way our Nancy or our Jane or whoever intrinsically in their soul wanted to move. And there are so many stories around that. So, do you use dance in your coaching?
In my everyday coaching, I do not, largely just because that's not what people have come to me for. That said, I did train with the Somatic School in London, which teaches body-oriented or somatic coaching, and I actually was a course trainer for them briefly. And sometimes people do want somatic work or body-oriented coaching, in which case I will lean into that. Once in a while in a dance venue, like a weekender or something like that, they'll ask me if I could bring some of those tools into teaching something that isn't dance specific insofar as I'm not teaching a dance movement, but like what are some of those, mindfulness tools that come from somatic awareness to just be present in yourself, to be present with another person that lets you be right here and now. So those thoughts aren't going about how should I be? How am I going to be judged? Judging others, and lets you be just present for whatever interaction is about to unfold.
Mm-hmm. And you're trained in body orientated coaching, and how does the mind body connection play a role in your coaching sessions?
Yeah, I think that's so important. And it's so interesting. And this comes back to actually a little bit of my old academic research, because body and identity was one of my most popular classes for many years. And I think it's great on the one hand that we're talking about mind body connection in Western paradigms. At the same time, the very fact that we're saying mind body connection implies that they're separate and that there's a bridge between them.
Mm,
Whereas a lot of traditional cultures, the closest translation would be, body mind. They're not separate. And so that idea that we have of mental health is different from physical health, that doesn't exist in some cultures. And so I think it absolutely applies. And so I think one of the tenets of like good coaching is you meet people where they are. So I'm never going to push into body oriented work whatsoever. I'm always going to meet someone where they are, but it's part of a toolkit because we carry things in our body. We all carry things in our body. And I think one of the most powerful examples, I have my own story as well, but that I heard was one of the international dance teachers who I respect so much. And I've never taken a dance lesson from her that isn't a life lesson. She told me a story of dancing with someone one time who she'd never met before, who didn't do anything inappropriate. And she just found herself starting to shake and she couldn't keep dancing.
Mm,
And she went to the side of the room and then just broke down sobbing. And it was only later she found out who trained that person, someone who had previously been abusive to her.
wow.
So the very fact that this individual had learned, there was something in the touch, in the physical mannerisms that the person dancing with her did nothing wrong, but it still was triggered. It was trapped in her body. I experienced something really similar. Probably late 2019. I was recovering from a spinal injury, nerve damage, was still flat on my back, barely able to move. An at-home physical therapist was there, and they were running late, and someone else who was coming to help was a little early. And they were trying to just get a baseline blood pressure for me, or a heart rate. Sorry, it was a baseline heart rate. Well, the person who was coming to help was someone who I had wanted to marry at one point, and it hadn't worked out.
Mm.
I thought I had dealt with it. I really thought I had dealt with it. Well, that little heart rate monitor told me quite otherwise.
Wow,
And
you were
so
hooked
neither
up.
one of them knew what was going on, but man, was that thing racing.
Oh my
And it
gosh.
was like, wow, there's stuff I thought I had processed that I have not. And so that was, one of the times where I then went back and used some of the somatic tools and, really you need to get in touch with stuff because the way forward is through. You can't avoid
Mhm.
those things that we
Mm-mm.
trap in, at a cellular level.
And I know there's a word for that. It's samsara, that it gets stuck there if it's not processed. If you don't process something right away, it's stuck there. And that's what it happened to you years down the road. Boom. It came up. Yeah, and I can almost feel how you were feeling, like that stomach gut and the headedness. And so you went home and worked on it. So what did you do to work through it? A lot of the stuff that you're teaching others, you just took back up upon yourself. I mean, you had the
Yeah.
tools to
Yeah, I
successfully
was
work through it.
fortunate to have those tools exactly. And
Mhm,
then you also turn to classmates who were getting the same training,
mhm,
or I had a co-trainer when we were actually teaching for the program. And so, we'd lean into each other and just say, can you help me out? Like, help me do some focusing and just find where there's something in my body and help me like just get in touch with it. And a lot of it also has to do with that idea of self and presence, that getting away from just even the mental self-talk of, I'm upset, I'm stressed. It's no, something in me is upset, something in me is distressed. Like, don't make it your entire identity and then attend to that. And I don't do parts work, but it's very related because it's recognizing that like we can have a multiplicity of things going on at once. Um, and it's not our identity, it's not definitional of us, but acknowledging those things and attending to them the way they need.
mhm, mm. And you mentioned here, if you want the transformation, you have to go to the essence. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Transformation isn't a surface process. If you just want a different appearance, fine, put a new coat of paint on it. But if you want to transform, it doesn't happen by anything that's not what is the core, what is the roots. If you want something to show up differently, you can't sort of just say, same ingredients, same process, we want a different outcome. It's like, no, I need to change things at that essential fundamental level if I want a different outcome. It
Mhm,
might look different otherwise, but it's not really different. And so true transformation is about, really identifying how you want to be in the world and then almost reverse engineering. Well, how do I need to be and what do I need to do to get there to show up that way?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That leads into your model being with all these being, be, begin where you are, E, explore where you're going, I, identify your options, and now start, G, get your best life. And can you explain a little more in depth about this strategizing, this strategy, and how to utilize it to identify a life and manifest the life that you really love?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting because that same dance teacher I was referencing before, I'd actually been taking a private lesson from her in Sao Paulo, which ironically I'm back in at the moment, back in early 2019. And just in as far as dance techniques, we'd gotten into a conversation about like actively trying to accomplish things versus just being a certain way and letting things unfold. And it started a really interesting philosophical discussion. Another friend I was on the phone with pointed out we're human beings, not human doings. I really thought I was on team being, if you will. I really thought I understood it. And then I had that spinal injury in early November 2019. And again, nerve damage. If anyone's ever had it, it is no
Mm-hmm.
joke, and I don't wish it on anyone. And normal pain meds do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
The type of pain meds that exist, like gabapentin, can take 6+ weeks to even start to alleviate it. And I, for nearly 5 weeks, was pretty much immobile, flat on my back.
Wow.
And aside from constant pain, helpless. And so didn't have any family living within multiple states. And what could they do? And so on social media, I was reaching out to, people locally. I need you to come by for 10, even 15 minutes a day. That's all I need. I need you to fill water bottles, mix me a protein shake. And, again, not the things we talk about with everyone, but you need to empty a portable urinal for me because I cannot move.
Mm.
And it
Wow.
really forced me to have some of those existential debates with myself. Do I have the same value in the universe when I could do everything I was doing?
Mm-hmm.
I can't do all the dancing I was doing. I can't walk. I don't know if I ever will again. Does just being Jonathan, is that the same Jonathan as when I was doing the things Jonathan did? Do I have as
Mm-hmm.
much value as a human being at all, just being here and literally being able to do almost nothing, and certainly nothing that was, part of my identity prior to that? And it was through that, and as I was starting to recover and then completing my coaching training, that it really hit me that being was just such a key concept to me, and that I think we get so caught up, especially in Western society, as you were referencing earlier, with doing, accomplishing, accolades, external measures of success, and that to really live deeply meaningful, fulfilling lives, it has to be about something different. It has to be something internal as far as the measure. And that's where I came up with the being as the acronym. So begin where you are. So often when we want to change, we just rush to change anything. And if you think about when you get in your car and do your GPS, whether it's in the car or on the phone, it needs a signal first. It needs to actually be able to tell where you are before it can navigate. Old-fashioned paper map, you still see an equivalent when you're in the airport or the mall. You are here. There's always a pin. Without it, it doesn't matter how good it is, it's useless.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's so important when I'm working, whether it's with clients one-on-one, consulting for, different types of organizations, let's really take stock of where you are. What's your life really like? And this also goes back to that, what is, not rushing to, how do we think should have been? How do we think we want things to be? But what actually is? Let's really take stock, because everyone has some strengths. Everyone has some tools and capacities. Everyone's learned lessons. Even the things which we may not feel serve us anymore, they served us in some way. Let's identify that and not try and throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, what are the parts of that that you can lean on, and just be much more intentional about how? So I think it's so important to begin where we are. E is for explore where you want to go, because again, it's so easy to fall into I just want to go on vacation. I just want to get away. But not all places serve you well. If you want to go on vacation, do you like museums and restaurants and cultural events? Do you like beaches? Do you like mountains and skiing? Do you like forests? I don't know. You need to figure out like what really appeals. And in so much of our lives, it's, well, you're going after the next promotion. Well, why? And not to say there's anything wrong with it, but does it really serve you? Or is it just that's what you've internalized is what you're supposed to do?
Another
So
should.
sure, maybe there's better paycheck, but what are the responsibilities? What are the time commitments? If those work for you, great, but maybe they don't, and don't just chase it because that's the expectation.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's funny because I wrote it one way and I use investigate interchangeably now, but it's the same idea of, investigate where you want to go. And I think there's actually two processes here. And the first one that I think is actually most important, and I ask people to write, again, two lists. On the left side, what are the best decisions you've ever made in the sense of after the fact, you to this day think those were the most, meaningful, fulfilling choices or pivot points? And on the right side, which are the ones that are the opposite? Which are the ones that you wish you had done differently? And now I want you to think about how did you make each of those choices? Because we're first going to actually identify how you make the choices you're happiest with in the long run and what strategies don't work for you. And everyone's different. Sometimes it's just a pro and con list. Sometimes it's I talk to, my loved ones who know me well and see what they think. Sometimes it's what's my gut feeling. So first identify what serves you best. Now apply that to, well, what are all the options, right? Do you want the most direct route? Do you want the scenic route? Do you, want to be able to check in with people who you haven't had a chance to connect with in a long time? What serves you? Do you want to have a quick transition away from your current circumstance? Do you want to be more gradual because that's what your nervous system is calling for? So just identify what are all the options between A and B, and then apply how have you in the past made your best decisions? What does that tell you about making that decision? And go ahead.
Oh, no. It's G. You're on G now, right?
No, N. Now
N.
start.
Yeah, N.
Yep.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yep. And it was funny because when you were just even reading it out to begin with, you smiled at that one, that the now start.
Yes.
And I think it's so interesting because so often we get caught up. And again, I think it's part of that pressure from getting things right and those external measures and perfectionism that all too often people don't start because they want to get it right. Well, there is no one right. And part of what I focus on and work with people about is if you've understood where you are, you understand where you want to go, and you understand why you chose the route you did, then there's no problem with starting. And then if there's a detour, there's a detour. We've all driven home from work. And sometime or another, you need to go around something, but you're not lost. You know where you're going and you get there. Or sometimes you're driving along and it's like, oh, there's a fruit stand by the side, and it's just, half a kilometer down the road. Well, if you don't feel like it, you don't go. And if you feel like it, you do. You're not lost because you know why you're going the direction you're going. And so now start is about really making sure we get started and we have the tools to restart because we all hit roadblocks and setbacks. And that brings us to the G, which is get your best life. And I don't mean it in the sense of it's a one-time process and you're done and everything's perfect. If you know how to get there, please get in touch because I want you as my coach. For me, it's so easy to lose track of the growth and the progress and the changes we do make. And so it's really consolidating for ourselves. Wait a minute, I have traveled this far. I've gained these tools. I've gained these experiences. I am in a different place. And so you could also look at G almost as gratefulness as well, gratitude. Mm-hmm. And with the whole idea of now you have that process under your belt, you can repeat it however many times you want for anything you want going forward. So you really do have the possibility of your best life now because you're equipped to keep pursuing the things that are most meaningful and fulfilling to you.
Mm-hmm. That's a great model. use it. And we see so many people that there's some real quick takeaways. I mean, this is a great model for people to live by, but where they can, where's my question? Sorry. I just lost it. Well, there's so many people that are feeling unfulfilled despite external accomplishments. Like we see so many people so successful. You know, we look at them, they've got the house, the car, the wife, they've got they keep rising up in the corporate ladder, but we're seeing so much unhappiness. So, any advice to somebody that might be, there's so many people, especially like here in the United States, they've got all these external accomplishments, but are not happy and they don't know a way forward to live a more aligned and happy life. Are there like 3 takeaways that you can leave somebody that might be listening today to really begin exploring?
Yeah. So the strategy piece we just talked about, right? Being is a big
Mm-hmm.
strategy piece, but you can't apply strategy in the moment when you're dealing with everything. And so that's what I think is so important about having other tools. So one of the ones I actually mentioned already, which is just replace should with could. That changes so
Mm-hmm.
much because, well, I work hard, I should have the same things they do. Or, they really aren't a nice person, they shouldn't have blank. It doesn't do anything. Like what is. And the
Mm-hmm.
minute we're fighting with what is, we're never going to be able to find something that's really fulfilling. The next one, I think there's a lot of really good and important work that's been done on like meaningful living. And at the same time, that can be too big in the moment. So, Viktor Frankl and logotherapy, Simon Sinek, start with why. Great work. I recommend all of it. But when
What is
I'm
it? What is
over,
that one? Sorry. I'm gonna write
sorry,
it down.
Simon Sinek, TED Talks, books about start
Okay.
with why.
Okay.
Really great stuff. And again, Viktor Frankl and logotherapy was really, something that came out of the Holocaust and his observations between people who, given the absolute crucible of human experience and the atrocities, why did some people shrivel and some still managed?
Mm.
And what it really came down to is people who could find meaning, and not a meaning, but a meaning for themselves. It wasn't the meaning. It's not preaching anything. And since then, that therapeutic model has been applied to everything from relationships to drug addiction and recovery. People need to get in touch with something again bigger than themselves to really live a fulfilling life. And I think that's all amazing work. And I also know both from my own experience and from working with clients, when I'm in the heat of it, when I have these competing commitments, when I am overwhelmed by like almost, it feels like tidal waves of emotion, I can't get in touch with my why or my meaning. And again, it's not
Mm-hmm.
to discount any of that work, but in the moment, what really I find the most helpful is just focus on one simple question. How do I want to be?
Mm.
How do I want to be? And that can apply to in this particular environment, in relationship to this particular person, in this very conversation or interaction. And if we can just focus on how do I want to be, and as much as is possible, align what we do with that, then over time, if you're always showing up the way you want to show up, you're going to have a pretty meaningful and fulfilling life.
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing I would offer is really an extension of that, because I've been in those situations where even that, like, I don't know, I couldn't have done it directly, but I've also had too many of those experiences in the past where, like, whether it's 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years later, I've gone, crap, I wish I'd done something different. I wish I'd said something different. And we've all had those.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was right as I was recovering from the spinal injury and I was finally able to sit up in a, supported chair for, periods of time each day, uh, by coincidental circumstance, maybe by synchronicity, who knows, ended up being the end of a relationship. It was a long distance relationship. And to that point, it had been the most rewarding, healthy, romantic relationship of my life.
Mm.
And the end caught me a bit off guard. Um, Amazing woman, not her fault. It just circumstances of some articles that I had due and whatever. It just caught me off guard. My
Mm-hmm.
mind was elsewhere. And I remember somehow in the middle of that conversation, again, long distance, um, I had tears streaming down my face. And I just somehow had this awareness, I'm not going to get to do this minute over. This is the only time I can do this moment. And so she had asked if like I just wanted to stop talking for the night, check in a week, whatever it was. I'm like, give me a minute. And I just remember thinking to myself, what am I going to have wanted to have said? Playing with tenses a lot there. But, the short version is, what is the 5 year from now, Jonathan, going to have wished I'd said or done right now? And so I've now called that future casting. And I was able to identify it. And it wasn't easy to say at all. It was heartbreaking, but it was not hard to identify. It was actually pretty simple. It was, I just want to thank you for, this amazing relationship and all the shared experiences. And more than anything else, I want to thank you for being you.
Wow.
And I have no regrets about how I left that situation.
Oh, that's incredible. That's incredibly mature. Like, because all the fight or flight response that you're having right now and all the grief that you're feeling, you're able to reach into the future casting. Is that what you call it? Like, how did
Yep.
you do that? The reptilian brain takes over so many of us, like, oh my God. Or like, I'm not going to show my emotions. I'm not going to show that I'm hurt.
No,
That was
I don't
so
know. Enough
incredible. What a
experiences
gift
had
for her as
happened.
well.
I hope so. And I mean, we still, are in touch occasionally, and I still have
Mm-hmm.
nothing but the utmost respect and admiration for her as a person and as a woman and as, a former partner. And I'm very thankful for everything that happened.
Mm-hmm. Because it's not easy on the other end as well to end a relationship. And you just really gave her a gift there. And you gave yourself a gift more than ever because later on it's like, what? Why did I do this? Why did I hide what I was feeling? And then yeah, you can't go back to that. So that's pretty incredible. So just a few more questions before I go. I don't know if you mentioned what your injury was. I'm curious what it was that led you to that nerve pain. Sounds so incredibly horrific. And how long until you were healed? I
Mm,
mean, some people live with that forever.
yeah.
Debilitating.
I have a history of other injuries. Like I've had a bad back since I was young and it's genetic in the family.
Mm.
My pelvis likes to rotate out of alignment. I have permanent tendon damage in my right shoulder from a car accident. This one, we don't know to this day where it came from. I was asked all the questions about, did you fall? Were you in a car accident? It's like in my life, yes, but nothing within a half a year prior to. I was at a conference driving home from the airport. Was like, oh, this is tight. I better go to the chiropractor tomorrow morning. Tried to get out of bed the next morning, and there was this lightning bolt of agony that just shot through my right side. And I had to drag myself across the floor on my elbows. Like
Wow.
I couldn't do anything else. And it was damage to the L3 nerve channel on the right side. Still don't know why. Uh,
Mm.
it was severely mishandled originally, not by my doctor who sent me from his office to the ER by ambulance. They never did an x-ray. They never did an MRI. We misdiagnosed it as femoral neuropathy at first. And that was November 6th that I was at the ER. And it wasn't until early January we actually finally got back an MRI that had happened in late December and did a nerve conduction test. It was like, yeah, there was major nerve damage there. And I was finally starting to uh, walk again, first with, at home physical therapy, then uh, at a facility. So beginning to walk first, with the walker, and then finally unaccompanied right as the pandemic hit. And
Mhm.
so I used to travel a fair amount and go to dance events and then had nothing for a long
Mhm.
time. And part of the other challenge was when I had the nerve pain, and was lying still, no appetite. So
Mhm.
lost an amazing amount of weight and just so much muscle atrophy. And then once I started moving again, my appetite came back, but I had no physical exercise. And so I actually gained a lot of weight. And when I was in the doctor's office one time, just like checking in on everything, and I saw the number on the scale, it's like, I've never been that heavy in my life. And the rest of my life is starting to align with the life I want to live going forward. I'd already committed to leaving academia and moving into coaching. I was already planning to, move out of the US and set up sort of home base elsewhere in Europe. But the weight and my physical fitness was like, this isn't right for me. This isn't in alignment with the life I want to live. And so then just through starting to pay more attention and be much more mindful about what I was actually eating, and then just walking more and more, dropped what was, I think, 60 pounds,
Wow.
and have kept most of it off, little
Hmm.
fluctuations. And then once I was able to, got back on the road to dance events, and that injury has not come back, thank the universe.
Wow, it just came out of nowhere. I mean, it's like the black diamond skier that just bends over to put their underwear on and throws out their back, like just something random like that. What a humbling experience. And so you had to really integrate a lot of your own tools to get you out of that. And is that one of the catalysts that led you away from your original cultural anthropology or academia into the coaching?
It wasn't what launched it, but it was, again, that's where I really consolidated that being piece. That's where I really
Hmm.
came up with what's my approach to really doing transformational life coaching. Because
Hmm.
I'm trained, as a coach in general, but that experience was how I found really my path and what was aligned for me and where I felt I could make the biggest difference for others. The original decision to leave academia also happened in Brazil. Um, in the first half of 2019 in Rio de Janeiro. And I was staying with a good friend of mine who still lived there at the time, Geronimo. And he always very generously, allowed me to stay in a small spare back bedroom at his house or his apartment. And I remember sitting in the living room, and it wasn't one of the tourist areas, Via Isabel. It's mostly, local people. A lot of, tourists are never going to have even heard of it, let alone gone there. And I remember looking across the street and just thinking to myself, like, the room I'm staying in is smaller than the closet in my master suite
Oh
at my house.
my
Yet I feel
God.
more at home here.
Hmm.
What is that about? And the more I really, was introspective about it, it was, well, all of my friends here in Brazil, they know what I do professionally. They're proud of me. They're proud for me.
And
They don't
acceptance.
care.
Uh-huh.
They love me, the person. They love Jonathan, not the accolades.
Hmm.
And as long as I stayed in academia, it was going to be about, what's your latest publication? What are your
Hmm.
teaching evals? What organizations have you been elected to the boards of?
Seems so
What
mine,
are your
mine, mine.
grants?
Hmm.
Yeah. And it was like, you know what? That's not for me
And
anymore.
the other
And so
one's expansive.
mhm,
Hmm.
that's what said to me, it's not academia anymore. And then when I thought about what it was okay, I was a tenured faculty member. So 40% of the job is research. I'm good at it. Had published multiple books. I don't love doing it. So I had two books under contract with the co-author. I just turned them over to her. I said, you go do them. I'm out. And I probably did her something of a disservice because I kept feeling an obligation, because amazing friend and colleague, and I felt like I was letting her down. I probably should have just turned him over earlier because I kept thinking I'd get the energy back and I didn't.
Hmm.
20% of a tenured position is service, so professional leadership. I'd been the president of two national organizations. I'm good at it. I'd rather help and see things turn out well than step back and just sort of like see where I could have made a difference. But I don't love doing that. And 40% is teaching, but so much of academia, especially in the US, has changed to follow these strict business measures. And so by the time I left, student evaluations, a 19-year-old isn't really qualified to evaluate. If you want to say, what's your satisfaction? What do you think? Fine, you're entitled to your opinion. But the university was putting on things like, how useful is this course to your future career? Well, maybe a 19-year-old doesn't know. And maybe not every class is about career. It's about just being an informed, thoughtful human being.
Hmm.
And so, okay, it wasn't most of teaching. And I realized it was those like informal 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning or end of class when students had their own questions, or my graduate students, like my MA and my PhD students, they're not working in a lab for me. They're not working on my project. I'm helping them figure out what are their questions and how are they going to find their own answers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what are your questions and how are you going to find your answers? Now we're talking life coaching, and that's what helped me pivot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you pivoted, and when so many people would stay in, despite those the dissatisfaction you started feeling that they start feeling, especially when they're tenured positions and all that stuff, and you left for something much more fulfilling. So, and I can't imagine right now. I'm seeing what is being taught in a lot of these colleges and all these, we won't even get into the subject now, but it's like, what are you teaching in these schools? Like, I think, so many subjects should be emotional intelligence, meditation, like how to, live in community. But some of the stuff that's being taught now and what teachers and faculty have to be under to adhere to, it just seems so restrictive and, in my opinion, insane. So you got off at the right time. So right now, what are your future plans and aspirations? I know you're traveling and you're coaching, both in your coaching practice and in your personal pursuits. I mean, you're a dancer, you like to do photography. What's lighting you up right now?
Yeah, so a lot of this comes to pretty much everyone's by this point heard of ROI as far as return on investment.
Mm-hmm.
The version I heard once, I wish I remembered, the academic in me just wants to give the correct citation. I read it in a book, don't know where it was, but ROI is ripples of impact.
Oh, yes, that's what I wanted to bring
And
up.
that to me was really the key. And it's really what lights me up because it goes back to how do I want to show up? And, I want to have positive ripples of impact. And that can look lots of different ways. But I've experienced it myself, like those key pivotal figures in my life. It doesn't have to be anything in particular they said or done, but just seeing how they show up,
Mm-hmm.
it shows me there's a different way. It shows me what are the things that I want more of in my life. To the contrary, there's also other people who, how they show up, it tells me I don't want to be that way. I don't want to put that out in the universe. And so, really, I love working with the clients that I have, always interested in talking to anyone else. And if I'm not the right person, that's fine. Like there is no such thing. Anyone who tells you they have the answer, that works for everyone, it's a scary human being. Run the other direction.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
I don't care what domain it is.
I am
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I'll go
Whether
through me.
it's politics, religion, coaching, business practices,
This is
I
the
don't care.
way. Yeah.
No, this is something that works for me and
Individual.
I'm willing to
Mm-hmm.
share it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it'll work for you too. So I love working with people and helping really, be a platform and a support for that transformation. I tend not to work with people for beyond a year. It tends to be even a little shorter because
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to equip people so they can
Mm-hmm.
go out because that's how you have the most ripples is when more and more people can keep doing it, not when I just keep working with the same people. And of course, clients I had 2.5 years ago, yeah, we'll get on the call every once in a while just to
Mm-hmm.
touch base or if they want to check something. I'm always available to that. And I'm hoping to do more speaking as well, because again, you just get to more people at a different level. And yeah, those are just things I really enjoy. Personally, I'm hoping to, I'll always enjoy traveling, but to wrap up my full-time nomadicism this year, and hopefully by the middle of the year, if not before, set up a home base in Portugal and
What part?
have
I
that
love Portugal.
Lagos down in the Algarve.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I did. That
Hmm.
was one of my last European trips was to Lisbon and then we went to Porto and such a colorful. It was in 2019 before the world went a little crazy. But it was in
Hmm.
2019 like in March and just so lit up and so like the people and the color and their food and the culture and the so you'll be in the warmer areas because you can't be in the colder regions.
No, exactly right. And yeah, then the only other piece of that would be I'd love to actually get to be involved in more retreat type events as
Hmm.
well. Whether it's bringing in just sort of the mindset and coaching frameworks or even the movement and unlocking things through somatic practices,
Hmm.
because, dance is so much life. And it's so interesting that so often in coaching, we talk about, coaching as that dance in the moment, but it's a great analogy. But very often coaches don't actually understand how rich an analogy it is because they don't have that much background in dancing. And so that's something I really enjoy exploring, is that, interplay between those things, because how we show up in the world also involves how we show up physically, like literally. And so just any place that I can be involved in things like that, consult on any types of, again, retreats, weekend events, week-long events, stuff that I just really enjoy doing. Again, building relationships, ripples of impact. And yeah, that's how I want to show up in the world and try to.
I love that. And it just must be so satisfying and so wonderful to see the transformation of so many people that you work with. And even, in speaking engagements or something like that, you just see something behind their eyes that lights them up and they get it. And, their whole world can change. And therefore the ripple effect happens, changing other people as well. Well, I'd love for my audience to find out how to work with you or how to find you, social media, your website, or any programs you might have.
Yeah. So obviously I'm available for one-to-one coaching. I also do group or team coaching. It can be around strengths-based work. It can be around the being framework, other topics as well. And really, if you want to get more information, I welcome any chance to connect, to talk, just see what might be, if I'm a good person, if I'm not, if I can offer any advice. So my website is stepsalongtheway.global. Steps along the way, because how we got to where we are is the steps we've taken, and how we end up with the life we want is being intentional about the ones we take next. And as we've just mentioned, I am digital nomad, so .global, I'm willing to work with people from anywhere and travel anywhere. And stepsalongtheway.global is the website, and stepsalongtheway.global/schedule, complimentary 30-minute consultation.
Wow.
Let's just have a conversation. And again, if something I could support you with after that going forward, let's discuss it. And if you just want to pick my brain about something, that's great. Relationships are what make the world go round and make it better. So happy to just have a new one.
Okay, wonderful. I love that you're offering like that 30-minute consult call, because then they get to know you and you get to know them and see if it's a real good fit without having to they put that financial commitment. They want to be able to know that they're able to work with you and resonate with you. So, and I can't see how they won't want to resonate with you, because you're so knowledgeable and personable and you're humble and in so many ways as well. So wonderful. And I'll put all that information in the show notes. And I have one last question before we go. And that is for you. I asked all my guests, and if you listen to JJ's, you've heard it. It's, what does it mean for you to live with an awakened heart?
Yeah, it's interesting because I did hear it. And at the same time, even as you ask it, it's like, okay, but what does it mean right here and now? Not like a canned answer, right? Like, what does it mean to live with an awakened heart? I think it comes down to just being open to love. And I mean that in love in the biggest energetic sense, not to receiving it from a particular person in a particular paradigm, not to giving it in a particular way. But, I'm sure you and many listeners have heard, but I mean, you can really act from fear or from love. And so fear is real. It happens. It signals to us that there's something that's alarming. There's nothing wrong with it. But an awakened heart is like making your decisions, and for yourself and for how you interact in the world, be open to love.
And it's love is just its own force and its own entity. And it makes me think of what I believe it was Marion Williamson says, what would love do? So when you're caught up with all these conflicting thoughts or fears, reacting one way or reacting in anger, what would love do? Such a beautiful thing. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me today and my beautiful, wonderful audience on the Awakened Heart podcast. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Absolutely my pleasure, Nancy. Thank you so much for having me, and best wishes to everyone listening.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Awakened Heart podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, share it with a friend. And if you haven't already, head on over to your favorite podcast app to subscribe, rate, and review. If you have any comments, questions, or feedback, you can reach me at theawakenedheartpodcast.com.